Just when it felt like the Brown family drama had finally hit its ceiling, a move surfaced that took everything to a darker, more calculated level. According to people close to the situation, Kody Brown didn't just lash out emotionally this time, he went legal. And not because he was cornered, but because he wanted control one last time. The story quietly circulating is that Kody made a move meant to lock everything down. The land, the money, the timing, all of it. By allegedly stepping into bankruptcy protection or triggering an insolvency action, the goal wasn't survival, it was sabotage. The plan was simple and cruel. Freeze the assets tied to Coyote Pass so Janelle couldn't sell, couldn't access her equity, and couldn't use what was rightfully hers to fund her wedding or her future. He believed that if the money stopped flowing, panic would follow. Vendors unpaid, plans collapsing, and eventually, Janelle picking up the phone, forced to negotiate with the man she had already walked away from. What Kody didn't understand was that this wasn't the same woman he once controlled with guilt and financial pressure. The real shock wasn't the legal maneuver itself. The real shock was who had been watching quietly from the sidelines the entire time. Janelle's fiancé. A man with resources, business sense, and something Kody never planned for, leverage. Rumors now suggest that instead of simply covering wedding costs, Janelle's fiancé made a far smarter move. He didn't fight Kody head-on. He went around him. And in doing so, he may have purchased Kody's debt outright. That means while Janelle was preparing to walk down the aisle, her future husband was stepping into the role of creditor, not just figuratively, but legally. Let that sink in. The man who spent years positioning himself as the family's authority figure may now owe money to the very person replacing him. The power shift is staggering. For years, viewers watched Kody drain the family finances while insisting he was holding everything together. Money from Mary. Retirement savings from Janelle. A clean exit for Christine that left her with little more than dignity. All while Robin's lifestyle grew larger and more insulated. But once the other wives left, the math stopped working. Reality TV money doesn't stretch far when the support system disappears. That's why the timing matters. This wasn't just about Janelle's wedding. It was desperation masked as strategy. Kody likely believed that freezing the land would cut off Janelle's oxygen. That without access to Coyote Pass money, she would stall, retreat, or give up her share just to stay afloat. Instead, she stayed silent. And silence in high-stakes situations usually means something is happening behind the scenes. What appears to have happened next is the kind of move Kody never saw coming. By allowing debts and liens to pile up, especially tax-related ones, Kody made his financial obligations transferable. In the real world, debt isn't personal. It's a product. And that product can be bought. The theory gaining traction is that Janelle's fiancé used a private LLC to quietly acquire those obligations. No confrontation. No drama. Just paperwork. A standard notice would have arrived informing Kody that his debt had been transferred. A generic company name. Nothing that raised alarms. Until the realization hit. Because once the debt changes hands, so does the power. If that debt is missed, delayed, or violated, foreclosure becomes a legal option. Suddenly, the land Kody once treated as untouchable isn't fully his anymore. He's no longer the gatekeeper. He's a participant, and not the one in charge. This is why the wedding itself carried such a different energy. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't scaled back. It wasn't damaged by financial chaos. It was calm, confident, almost victorious. Janelle didn't look like someone escaping a past. She looked like someone who had already won. Guests reportedly felt it too. Her children looked lighter, relieved, as if a weight they'd carried for years had finally been lifted. This wasn't just a marriage celebration. It was a quiet declaration of independence. And then came the subtle moments. The kind you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. A toast referencing owning the ground we stand on. Laughter that carried meaning. Smiles that said more than words ever could. No names mentioned. No accusations spoken. But everyone in the room understood exactly what it meant. While joy filled that space, tension was building elsewhere. Because when financial control slips away, relationships built on dependency start to crack. Loyalty doesn't cover debt. And confidence fades quickly when the safety net disappears. The most brutal part of this entire situation is that none of it is illegal. It's business. Clean. Calculated. Done using the same rules Kody once relied on to dominate everyone else. This time, those rules worked against him. And the long game matters most. By controlling the debt tied to Coyote Pass, the land can't be sold off impulsively. It can't be liquidated to fund bad decisions or indulgent spending. That land, once promised to the kids, is finally protected. Not by the man who talked about legacy, but by the woman who quietly secured it. Now TLC is scrambling. This isn't just a storyline, it's a franchise reset. Cameras are reportedly capturing the fallout. Awkward meetings. Defensive confessionals. A man trying to explain away the loss of control while knowing the receipts exist. And the irony is almost poetic. The paycheck he now needs may be going straight to the person who outplayed him. The final image says everything. Janelle signing her marriage license. Not just committing to love, but locking in security, control, freedom. And somewhere else, a man staring at land he no longer truly commands. Kody tried to cancel the wedding. He tried to freeze the future. Instead, he handed the power to someone else. Because the best revenge isn't anger. It's ownership. And this time, Janelle walked away with both. The moment everyone assumed the Brown family chaos had finally peaked, a far more ruthless move began unfolding behind the scenes. This wasn't another argument, another emotional outburst, or another family meeting gone wrong. This time, it was quiet, calculated, and aimed straight at Janelle's future. According to people familiar with the situation, Kody Brown allegedly turned to the legal system not to protect himself, but to trap someone else. The timing wasn't random. It came just as Janelle was preparing to close one chapter of her life and officially begin another. The move in question was designed to stop money from moving, land from selling, and independence from becoming permanent. The belief is that Kody attempted to lock down everything connected to Coyote Pass by triggering a financial freeze. Whether through bankruptcy protection or a formal claim of insolvency, the effect would be the same. Assets tied to the family would be locked in place. No sales. No transfers. No quick access to equity. And most importantly, no wedding funds coming from land that Janelle partially owned. The intention behind it wasn't subtle. If Janelle couldn't access her share, she couldn't move forward cleanly. Vendors would be left waiting. Plans would stall. Pressure would build. And under that pressure, Kody expected the same outcome he'd relied on for years: panic, compromise, and control returning to him. What he failed to understand was that the woman he was trying to corner no longer existed. This wasn't the Janelle who stayed quiet to keep the peace. This wasn't the one who sacrificed stability for the sake of the family structure. This was someone who had already emotionally detached, already rebuilt her life, and already accepted that walking away meant never asking permission again. And while Kody believed this move would isolate her, he didn't realize someone else was watching the situation unfold with a very different mindset. Someone who wasn't emotionally triggered. Someone who didn't react, but calculated. Janelle's fiancé wasn't just aware of what was happening. He understood it. He saw the maneuver for what it was, a control tactic disguised as financial necessity. And instead of pushing back publicly or fueling the drama, he stayed quiet. Because in the world of money and leverage, silence usually means preparation. Kody assumed that cutting off access to land would choke Janelle's plans. That without immediate cash, she'd be forced to slow down, scale back, or surrender her position entirely. What he didn't know was that her future no longer depended on that land to move forward. And that miscalculation would change everything. The silence that followed should have been the first warning sign. In situations like this, when panic doesn't arrive, it usually means a counter-move is already underway. While Kody was waiting for a phone call that never came, the situation was quietly shifting out of his control. For years, the financial structure of the family worked because everyone else kept feeding it. Once that stopped, the cracks became impossible to hide. Supporting a lifestyle built for multiple incomes on a shrinking reality TV paycheck was never sustainable. Debt didn't just appear overnight. It stacked up slowly, then all at once. Taxes, loans, obligations tied to land that was never developed, pressure from every direction. The timing of Kody's financial maneuver wasn't just strategic, it was desperate. By locking things down when he did, he wasn't only trying to block Janelle's exit. He was also trying to protect himself from the consequences of years of mismanagement. The problem was, those consequences don't disappear when you freeze assets. They just become visible. And visibility is dangerous. In the financial world, unpaid obligations don't sit quietly forever. When debts grow large enough, they stop being personal problems and turn into commodities. Liens can be transferred. Notes can be sold. And once that happens, the original owner loses all emotional leverage. What's left is paper, numbers, and enforceable terms. That's where the situation took a turn Kody never saw coming. Instead of reacting emotionally, Janelle's fiancé reportedly began looking at the situation the way a businessman would. Not as family drama, but as an opportunity created by vulnerability. As obligations piled up, those debts became something that could be acquired quietly, without confrontation, without explanation, and without Kody's approval. The theory circulating is that a private holding company was used, a name bland enough to raise no alarms. Just another LLC. Just another routine transfer notice buried in the stack of paperwork Kody was already overwhelmed by. To him, it likely looked like background noise. Another problem to deal with later. But that paperwork mattered more than he realized. Because once a debt changes hands, loyalty no longer matters. History doesn't matter. Intentions don't matter. All that matters is compliance. Miss a payment. Violate a term. Delay too long. And the balance of power shifts permanently. What Kody thought was a freeze designed to stop Janelle instead created an opening he couldn't close. By allowing obligations tied to Coyote Pass to remain unresolved, he exposed the one thing he believed no one could ever touch. And the person who stepped into that space wasn't a stranger. While Kody believed he was waiting out the storm, control was quietly transferring elsewhere. The land he once treated as untouchable was no longer fully in his hands. The rules had changed, and he didn't even realize it yet. By the time the implications became clear, the leverage he depended on was already gone. The moment the reality of that shift began to surface, everything around Kody started to feel different. The land he once spoke about as if it were his legacy, his kingdom, was no longer a symbol of power. It had become a liability he didn't fully control. And for a man whose authority was built on ownership and access, that realization is devastating. While Kody remained focused on stopping Janelle, he failed to recognize that she no longer needed what he was trying to withhold. Her future wasn't hinging on a land sale or a delayed payout. She had already secured stability elsewhere. And that meant the pressure tactic he relied on for years had no effect this time. This is why the wedding unfolded the way it did. Calm. Confident. Untouched by chaos. There were no last-minute compromises, no scaled-back plans, no visible stress. Janelle didn't look like someone escaping a situation. She looked like someone stepping into a life she had already prepared for. The atmosphere spoke volumes. Her children appeared lighter, more relaxed, as if a tension they'd lived under for years had finally dissolved. This wasn't just a celebration of marriage. It was a quiet acknowledgement that a chapter defined by control and uncertainty had finally closed. And then came the moments that carried deeper meaning. The kind that don't need to be explained out loud. A carefully chosen line during a toast. A shared glance. Laughter that landed a second too late because the implication had to sink in first. No names were spoken, but everyone understood what was being referenced. Somewhere else, the contrast couldn't have been sharper. Because when power is built on dependency, losing control exposes everything underneath. Financial pressure doesn't just affect bank accounts, it reshapes relationships. The confidence that once came from being the decision-maker starts to erode. And when the safety net begins to fray, loyalty alone isn't enough to hold things together. The most striking part of this entire situation is how clean it is. No shouting. No public confrontation. No dramatic ultimatums. Just legal reality. Business conducted by the book. Using the same framework that once benefited Kody, now working against him. And the implications go far beyond one wedding or one financial maneuver. By shifting control over the obligations tied to Coyote Pass, the land is no longer at risk of being impulsively sold or drained to support bad decisions. What was once unstable is now contained. The promises made to the children, the future they were told this land represented, are finally protected by someone who understands long-term strategy instead of short-term ego. That's the part that stings the most. The man who talked endlessly about legacy no longer controls it. The woman who was told she didn't contribute enough is the one who secured it. And the power that once ruled the family didn't disappear in a dramatic collapse. It simply moved, quietly, into more capable hands. Kody believed he was playing the final card. What he didn't realize was that the game had already ended.